I am Sarah, 30 years old. That night, when I opened my phone, the screen lit up with a notification from the family group chat that included siblings, parents, aunts, and uncles. A short message from my mother, Linda, appeared. "We've discussed it. We think it would be best if you stepped back for now, kept some distance." Just 13 words, yet they cut through years of effort I had poured into this family like a sharp blade. Immediately after, a cold thumbs-up icon appeared. The one who pressed it was my Aunt Margaret. Not a single person objected, not one word of defense. Only the silent line of "seen." I stared at the screen, chest tightening, but strangely I felt calm. Slowly I typed, "Understood. I'll respect this decision, and I'll also withdraw from the family fund." I hit send, closed my laptop, and sat still in the quiet of my apartment. The family fund I referred to was no small matter. It was a shared pool of capital used to finance projects, investments, even vacation homes. Out of the total $11 million, my contribution alone was $4 million, more than 1/3. I was the largest investor, yet the easiest one to cast aside as if I had never existed. With a few steps on the banking system, I closed the linked account. Within seconds, the screen displayed "Transaction successful." A rush of bitterness mixed with relief swept over me. For the first time in years, I felt unbound. By 2:15 a.m., my phone began buzzing relentlessly. 6 missed calls within the first 5 minutes. I turned it face down and tried to close my eyes. By sunrise, there were 82 missed calls, not counting the flood of messages. In the voicemail box, my father's voice, hoarse with panic, pleaded, "Sarah, what happened? The bank froze all the accounts. Call me back right now, this has to be a mistake." I glanced at it once, then set the phone down. I sent back only one line. "I'm simply doing exactly what you all asked. I've stepped away." Behind that cold decision lay a long history of being dismissed. I had built, contributed, and swallowed the sting of exclusion time after time. And in return, all I received was a brief message. That single thumbs up from Aunt Margaret was not just a symbol. It was the final nail in my trust. That morning, as I poured a cup of hot coffee, the phone rang endlessly, but I didn't bother to touch it. Only one thought echoed in my mind. They chose to discard me, and now they'll understand the consequences of underestimating the only person keeping the family fund alive. I sat by the window watching people walk along the small street in the suburbs of Chicago where I lived. Sunlight filled the room, but within me stirred a new sensation: freedom. For years, I had been imprisoned by the hope of recognition. Now their rejection had opened another path. In my head, I still heard my mother's voice. "We only want what's best for you." I let out a dry laugh. If they truly wanted what was best, they wouldn't have let me shoulder the largest financial burden without ever acknowledging it. They thought I would stay silent, nod, and keep paying. But no. I am no longer the fragile Sarah they once knew. My phone kept lighting up nonstop, even though I had already switched it to silent. By 8 a.m., the voicemail box was overflowing with panicked voices. The longest message came from my uncle William, the man known for being the coldest in the family. "Sarah, you must realize what you've done, right? The entire fund is frozen. Partners are calling non-stop. The real estate deal in Houston is as good as gone if the money isn't released in time." I poured myself another cup of coffee, calmly listening to his trembling voice. A $20 million project, one they called the breakthrough of the century, was now hanging by a single thread. The family fund was meant to be everyone contributing together. Yet for 6 years, the one who contributed the most was me. They had grown so used to drawing from my effort, treating it as natural, that no one noticed how fragile it all was. How one withdrawal from me could topple the structure like a building with no foundation. The bank reacted faster than I expected. Just minutes after I confirmed the withdrawal of $4.2 million, plus the profits generated from that very contribution, the system immediately triggered a risk control review. The account was frozen pending verification, which meant every transaction from my family ground to a halt. It was like a sharp pair of scissors, slicing through their grand ambitions midair. By 9 a.m., I glanced at my phone. 47 new messages. Among them was a recording from my father, Robert, his voice hoarse. "Sarah, you need to go back to the bank right now. This is the most important investment of the year. If the Houston deal goes to a competitor, we lose not only money but our reputation. Doing this is no different than destroying your own name." I gave a cold laugh. Suddenly they remembered the word we, when just last night they told me to keep my distance. How ironic. Around noon, a message from my cousin Amanda appeared. You did the right thing. Don't let them pull you back. But be careful, they're already plotting to put all the blame on you. I leaned back in my chair, reflecting. Amanda rarely dared to speak up, yet here she was, secretly standing with me. That meant not everyone in the family was blind. It was just that none of them had ever dared to go against the majority. By the afternoon, an official email arrived from the family's lawyer, Jonathan Reed. The subject line was chillingly plain. Urgent. Regarding withdrawal from the Miller Fund. The content stretched nearly 4 pages, citing clauses and insisting my actions had caused serious harm to the collective interest. At the very end, Jonathan added a personal note. Sarah, I know you acted within the rules. But be prepared, they won't stop at words. I closed the email strangely calm. They wanted to brand me as the troublemaker? Fine. But the truth was the fund operated mainly on my capital. Without me, all those glossy contracts were nothing more than worthless paper. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was an unexpected video call from my father. I answered, letting his face fill the screen. Robert looked pale, stripped of his usual composure. Do you understand the consequences, Sarah? He pressed. Of course, I replied evenly. I'm only doing exactly what the family decided, stepping away. Don't twist words. You've put the Houston project in jeopardy. 15 partners are waiting for transfers. If we delay even 2 more days, they'll sign with Carson Group instead. I leaned back, staring straight at him. Then maybe Carson will get an excellent investment. As for me, I'm just following the law. He fell silent for several seconds, blinking rapidly. I knew he had never imagined his daughter would dare turn her back. To him, I had always been the one given a chance, not the one truly holding the key. Right after the call ended, a text popped up from an unknown number. Sarah, this is David Tran, account oversight manager at the bank. I can't share details, but know this. Your family is making a scene. They're demanding the board intervene, but your transactions are fully valid. The account will clear verification by early next week. I smiled. David's calm assurance was the clearest answer to the chaos raging on their end. That night, as I stood by the window watching the city lights, one thought echoed in my mind. This is only the beginning. They had lived in the illusion that I was the easiest link to replace. Yet with a single withdrawal, the entire Miller machine, once thought as solid as a fortress, was already trembling. I was born into a family whose very name was enough to make people turn their heads. The Morgans of Boston were not just wealthy. They were a financial dynasty that had endured for 3 generations. My grandfather, Edward Morgan, started it all after World War II, building Morgan Associates from a tiny office on Tremont Street. Through bold risks and sharp calculations, he turned it into an investment advisory firm once considered the pride of New England. But being born into the glow of that legacy did not mean I was treated fairly. My father, Robert Morgan, inherited the company and never stopped reminding me that my role in the family was only to assist the men. He credited every success of Morgan Associates solely to the men in the bloodline, ignoring the fact that I had created the very strategies that kept the firm alive through turbulent times. From an early age, I was different. While other kids played with dolls, I was drawn to the financial pages my grandfather left scattered on the table. At 10, I asked my first question about interest rate trends. A question that made my father frown but sent my grandfather into booming laughter as he patted my shoulder, saying, "This girl has a mind." But his recognition didn't last. When I came of age, he passed away, leaving everything to his only son, my father. From then on, my voice in the family was gradually muted. At 22, I graduated from Wharton with dual degrees in finance and economics. I returned, hoping to be embraced as a rightful successor. Instead, my father placed me under the supervision of my cousin Jake, 2 years younger than me, a recent graduate of a mediocre state school. His reasoning was almost laughable. Jake's been here longer. You need to learn the practical way from family. In reality, Jake had been at the firm just 7 months. I accepted it quietly, trusting that results would speak louder than prejudice. And they did. Over the next 8 years, the portfolios I managed consistently outperformed expectations. While the industry cheered at 2% gains, mine brought in 7 to 9%. Many clients signed contracts only if I personally oversaw their accounts. Yet every time reports were presented, it was my father standing up to claim the credit, with Uncle William and Aunt Margaret nodding proudly. Classic Robert. The 5-bedroom home in Brookline where I grew up overflowed with proof of status. Paintings worth hundreds of thousands, Italian imported furniture, and photos of my parents posing with politicians at lavish galas. My mother, Linda, perfected the role of hostess, serving her famous apple pie at dinners where multi-million-dollar deals were sealed across the table. I still remember when I tried to offer input on a transaction, and she gently pulled me aside, whispering, "Men don't like women talking too much about money. Let your father and uncles decide, then you'll be loved." But that love never came. What I got instead was erasure. My proposals for European expansion were dismissed, only for Margaret to reintroduce them weeks later almost word for word, earning applause. I stood in the corner, hands cold, swallowing humiliation, telling myself, "Be patient. One day they'll see." The family fund, established by my grandfather, had begun as a modest pool for reinvesting in real estate. Over the decades, it had grown into a multi-million-dollar resource where each member contributed and could withdraw. From my modest bonuses, small compared to what I deserved, I invested the most. While others dipped into the fund for luxury cars or summer homes in the Hamptons, I saw it as a way to strengthen our foundation. The bitter truth was, despite being the largest contributor, my voice carried the least weight. Decisions rested with my father, Uncle William, and sometimes even Jake, the same cousin who recycled my ideas. I was the shadow laboring behind the curtain while they basked in the spotlight. All those memories surged back the night I chose to withdraw my stake. I remembered my father's pen tapping sharply to silence me. Jake's smug grin as he announced a new initiative that was really my formula from 6 months earlier. My mother's hushed words, "Don't be too smart, Sarah. A wise woman knows when to step back." But I had stepped out of that shadow. My withdrawal was nothing less than a bomb planted in the heart of the empire they so proudly displayed. I was no longer the silent girl standing in the corner. Only one question remained in my mind. Would they finally find the courage to face the truth, that I was the one holding this legacy together from crumbling? I still remember the spring quarterly meeting last year in the mahogany-paneled boardroom at Morgan Associates headquarters. I had spent 3 weeks preparing, bringing in a plan to expand into green technology markets. I laid out the data, growth models, even detailed risk projections. Just as I began discussing the 12% profit potential within a year, Uncle William raised his hand to cut me off. "Sounds interesting, but let Robert decide if it's realistic." The whole room immediately turned to my father, as though his nod was the only decision that mattered. He shrugged and said coldly, "We should keep things simple, no need to chase fanciful ideas." I swallowed my frustration, gathered my papers. 2 months later, at another meeting, Jake presented a plan nearly identical to mine, only delivered with confident tone and a few colorful charts. This time my father applauded and Aunt Margaret beamed. "That's a smart direction, Jake. The family needs practical minds like yours." I sat in silence, biting my lip to keep tears from spilling. That wasn't the only time. In a meeting with a major client, I spent hours analyzing the market and outlining risk hedging strategies. But just as I finished, my father cut in. "Let me simplify this." He reduced everything I had carefully laid out into a few oversimplified, inaccurate sentences. The client still nodded along, but I could see in their eyes, the recognition wasn't mine. Many times I was deliberately excluded from closed-door meetings. Once I arrived early at the office only to find the boardroom locked, my father, Uncle William, Jake, and Margaret inside discussing matters with a client I had personally brought in. My heart clenched as I glimpsed the screen. It was my presentation. When the door finally opened, my father feigned surprise. "Oh, Sarah, you're here? We were just having a preliminary discussion." Dinner parties at Uncle William's house were no different. When guests praised the company's rapid growth, Aunt Margaret would smile graciously, all thanks to Robert and Jake keeping strong strategies. "Sarah is still young, but hopefully she'll learn one day." Laughter would ripple around the room while I gripped my wine glass, forcing a hollow smile. Each time they diminished me, I told myself, "Just hold on a little longer. One day they'll see." But slowly I came to realize the truth. My contributions would never be acknowledged. to them, I was just the daughter who needed guidance. No one in the family truly wanted me as an equal. The hardest blow came when I was 29. I had single-handedly salvaged a failing fund portfolio, turning it profitable again in just 3 months. Our biggest client, the Henderson family, called me directly saying, "Without Sarah, we'd have pulled out completely." I thought at last I would be recognized. But at the board meeting, my father stood and declared, "We're lucky Jake adjusted things in time, which is why the portfolio recovered." I froze. Every eye in the room turned to Jake while I disappeared into invisibility. That night I drove home in silence. I sat for hours in my living room staring at the city lights outside my window. I asked myself, how many more times? How many more times will I let them trample over my work? And in that moment I realized one thing. That day would never come. No matter how well I performed, I would never be valued in my own family. As the thought sank in, sadness hardened into resolve. I began archiving documents, saving emails, contracts, jotting down every detail of the projects I had led. I stopped expecting recognition. Instead, I prepared in silence, waiting for the moment when I would no longer be the shadow in the boardroom, but the one holding authority. And that moment arrived, the day they sent the family group message casting me out. The message they thought would make me quietly disappear became the very spark that ignited the boldest move of my life. After that silent night in my apartment, I began to change the way I lived. On the surface, I still showed up at Morgan Associates, quietly drafting reports and letting my father and Jake take credit for the plans. But beneath it all, I had stepped onto a different path, one no one in my family could have imagined. I founded a limited liability company called Halston Capital, headquartered discreetly in an office building in Boston's Back Bay. All the legal paperwork was filed under a separate entity, leaving no trace of my connection. I handpicked a small team, just 4 people, but their loyalty was absolute, bound by airtight confidentiality agreements. We worked nights and weekends, while my family thought I was buried in research for Morgan. My first client was a private equity fund introduced by an old Wharton classmate. They wanted a defensive strategy, something Morgan Associates would never consider, too entrenched in its old ways. I tested a trading algorithm I had written myself, and within 6 months they had grown 15%. Word spread quietly in financial circles. Soon another 2 clients came, then 5, then 10. To protect myself, I built personal service clauses into contracts. Clients didn't sign with the company, they signed with me. If I left, they had the right to follow. At first, it was just a safeguard, but over time I realized it would be the key to shifting the balance of power. I also spent time completing 7 patents for my market analysis algorithms, all registered under my own name. Late nights in my small apartment-turned-research lab, I wrote lines of code, ran thousands of simulations. No one in my family knew that the sample reports I brought to meetings were only scraps of what I had already perfected for myself. For years I lived 2 lives. By day I was Sarah, the daughter constantly reminded she needed more training, her ideas stolen in boardrooms. By night I was Sarah, the founder quietly managing over $400 million in assets. I didn't drive a luxury car, didn't wear Margaret's designer dresses, and never spent recklessly like Jake. I stayed quiet, drove a simple sedan, letting my family believe I had nothing but a degree and some foolish ambition. Sometimes it stung hearing my father say in front of relatives, "Sarah is smart but still impractical. Morgan Associates is the Real Foundation." I would only smirk, thinking, if you knew half the truth you wouldn't sleep at night. The biggest deal for Halston Capital came when I turned 30. An energy conglomerate wanted to test a new strategy and I agreed. Within 1 quarter, they earned profits far beyond forecasts. They signed a 3-year contract, and that brought many more high-profile names. My client list grew to 27, most of them billionaires well known in New England. There were times I sat in the family boardroom, listening to Jake drone on about new ideas that were nothing but stale repackaging, while my phone buzzed nonstop in my pocket, emails from Halston clients thanking me for exceeding expectations. The feeling was bitter yet powerful. I knew with certainty, the day I left Morgan, at least half of the firm's major clients would follow me. Not because I was Robert Morgan's daughter, but because they wanted to work with me. That knowledge gave me a confidence stronger than ever. I still remember a lunch with Amanda, the only cousin who partly understood. When I sighed about being shut out of another project, Amanda said softly, "Sarah, they'll never change. If it were me, I'd have left long ago." I just smiled, not revealing my secret. But inside I knew, that day was coming. I had prepared everything: documents, patents, binding contracts, a loyal team. All it would take was one push, and the Morgan Empire would finally be forced to face the truth. The one they had dismissed all along was the one truly holding the scales of power. That morning, I prepared my Back Bay apartment as if it were a professional boardroom. I covered the long dining table with a white cloth, neatly set out folders and pens. I brewed coffee, arranged a tray of pastries to make it seem ordinary, but inside I knew, this meeting would decide the future of the Morgan family. At exactly 8:30 a.m. the doorbell rang. On the camera screen I saw my father, Robert, at the front, followed by Uncle William, Aunt Margaret, Jake, and Attorney Jonathan. The air they carried was nothing like their usual arrogance. Tension clung to every step. I opened the door, letting them in. "Thank you for seeing us, Sarah," my father said, his voice strained. "Of course. Come in," I replied, keeping calm. They sat around the table, their eyes flicking nervously between the documents I had prepared. I remained standing, making sure they understood who was in control. My father began, "The Houston deal. We have less than 24 hours. Without the initial capital, it all collapses. The family needs you to put your money back into the fund." I raised my hand to cut him off, the very gesture he had used on me countless times in boardrooms. "Before we talk about Houston, let's be clear. The funds I withdrew were legal. The bank confirmed it. I will not return under the old terms." Uncle William flushed red. "You're holding the whole family hostage over pride?" I looked straight at him. "This isn't about pride. It's about value. 4 years I've delivered the biggest profits, yet I've been pushed aside. That ends now." Silence filled the room. I slid a file across to Jonathan. "I'm willing to save the Houston deal. I'll lend the family $5 million. Enough to close on time and still have cushion. But this will be a commercial loan at market interest with clear repayment terms." Jake shot up from his chair. "What? You're making us pay interest to you?" I smiled. "Exactly. If you're desperate, consider me a strategic investor. Any bank would do the same, except they'd also charge penalties." Jonathan skimmed the contract and nodded. "These terms are fair. Short-term lending rates right now are nearly double what Sarah is asking. If we don't accept, the deal is as good as lost." Aunt Margaret tried softening her tone. "Sarah dear, this is family. No one wants things to get harsh." I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "You were the one who pressed the thumbs up when I was cast out in that group chat. Don't talk to me about family now." My father inhaled deeply, torn between pride and reality. He turned to Jonathan. "Draft the contract. We have no choice." As Jonathan opened his laptop, I continued, "Beyond this loan, I want you all to understand something. I have my own firm, Halston Capital, managing over $400 million. I hold 7 patents. And at least $230 million in client assets at Morgan can legally follow me if I leave. Never assume I don't have a way out." Shock rippled around the table. Jake sneered, but panic flickered in his eyes. Uncle William slammed the table. "This is betrayal." I answered coldly, "No. This is preparation. If the family truly valued me, this meeting wouldn't exist." Jonathan printed the contract. I signed first, then slid it to my father. His hand trembled as he finally signed. For the first time, I saw reluctant acknowledgement in his eyes. As everyone filed out, my father lingered, glancing around the apartment. "You've been preparing all this for a long time, haven't you?" I simply smiled. "I had to. In this family, if you don't look out for yourself, you're nothing." He gave a small nod before walking out. The door shut, leaving me alone in the quiet room. I knew with certainty. The $5 million loan was only the beginning. The balance of power had shifted, and from here the real game had just begun. 3 weeks after that meeting at my apartment, the atmosphere in the Morgan family shifted completely. News of the Houston deal's success, made possible only by my emergency loan, spread quickly through financial circles. Partners whispered, "Without Sarah, the Morgans would have collapsed." The very words I had secretly longed for all these years were now echoing at the very parties where I used to be treated like a shadow. My father, Robert, had no choice but to call a special meeting with the entire leadership. Unlike usual, he didn't hold it at company headquarters but chose a luxury hotel in downtown Boston. I knew why. He wanted to avoid the watchful eyes of employees and clients, to conceal the cracks forming within the family. As I entered the room, the tension was palpable. Uncle William whispered to Aunt Margaret. Jake sat hunched with his hand to his forehead, and for the first time my mother, Linda, was present at a business meeting, her face etched with worry. I pulled out my chair, sat tall, no longer lowering my voice like I once did. Robert opened. After what's happened, it's clear we need to adjust. We cannot let a situation like this happen again. He paused, his eyes flicking to me. Therefore, I propose the creation of a new branch under Sarah's leadership. The room erupted. Jake leapt to his feet. What? She just caused a crisis and now you're handing her power. I turned calmly. No, Jake. I didn't cause a crisis. The crisis came from your dependence on me while refusing to acknowledge my value. I merely withdrew my own capital, and that alone toppled the system you all bragged about. That should tell you who's really keeping this ship afloat. Jonathan, the family's lawyer, slid documents across the table. This is the restructuring proposal. A new branch will be created, named Morgan Capital Strategies. Sarah will serve as CEO, overseeing all strategic investments. Profits and losses will be separate from the traditional division. Margaret frowned. That's practically handing the entire company to Sarah. I responded immediately. No, it's giving me the share I built through my own merit. From now on, my work will no longer be erased. Robert tapped the table lightly. One more change. The family fund will no longer have equal voting rights. From now on, votes will be proportional to each member's capital contribution. Whoever contributes more holds more power. The silence was heavy. I saw William's face drain. He had only ever put in a few $100,000, yet enjoyed equal voting rights with me for years. Jake's fists clenched tight. He had never put in real money at all. I spoke firmly. This is the bare minimum of fairness. I invested $4 million, yet for years my voice counted less than Jake's. Now everything will be based on reality, not favoritism. The debate dragged on for over 2 hours. William called me a traitor. Margaret invoked family bonds. Jake sneered that I was full of myself. But one by one they fell silent as Jonathan pointed out. Without these changes, partners might pull out. Rumors were already spreading that I was the true force behind Morgan Associates' success. At last, Robert exhaled heavily, voice weighted. Agreed. Morgan Capital Strategies will be established and Sarah will be CEO. He looked straight at me. From now on, you're no longer an assistant. You're the leader. I drew a deep breath, a blend of sweetness and bitterness filling me. Sweet because I was finally recognized. Bitter because I had to push them to the brink to get what should have been mine long ago. Almost immediately, I received emails from 2 major clients. We want to transfer our entire portfolios to your new branch. Within days, hundreds of millions of dollars flowed straight into Morgan Capital Strategies. My private team and I got to work, separating everything from the old company. Jake, unwilling to concede, cornered me in a smaller meeting. You think you've won? You're just lucky. I looked him straight in the eye and replied slowly. Jake, luck doesn't create 7 patents. Luck doesn't legally manage $400 million. Don't confuse the two. In the days that followed, the family no longer dared treat me as a shadow. I sat as an equal. No one cut me off. When I presented numbers, they listened. When I said no, no one overruled me. That was when I understood. The structure had permanently shifted. But deep inside, I knew they would never accept me easily. They would look for chances to drag me down. And I was ready. Because after all, I had lived under suspicion for years. The only difference now was that this time I was the one holding the power. 1 year had passed since I officially took charge of Morgan Capital Strategies. If anyone had doubted whether my new branch could survive, the numbers spoke for themselves. First-year profits grew 18%, far surpassing the parent company's modest 6%. More than 10 major clients had transferred their portfolios from Morgan Associates to work directly with me, including the Henderson family, once my father's pride. I remembered clearly the recent quarterly meeting at our new Cambridge headquarters. Sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows. As I presented the report, everyone listened in silence. even Uncle William, who once mocked me as the naive little girl. When the profit chart appeared on screen, all he could do was nod, speechless. Jake was different. He still tried to dismiss my success, blaming the market or luck. But every time he opened his mouth, the hard data turned his words hollow. Once he sneered, "Clients just want novelty. They'll come back to the parent company." I replied calmly, "If it were only novelty, they wouldn't have signed 3-year contracts with me." The room fell silent, and for the first time Jake had no answer. My father, Robert, began to change. He no longer interrupted me. Instead, he waited until I finished before adding his thoughts. I noticed something in his eyes, not disdain but recognition tinged with regret. Once, when only the two of us remained after a meeting, he sighed, "Sarah, I was wrong not to see you sooner. If your grandfather were alive, he'd be proud." I said nothing, only nodded. His late apology couldn't undo the past, but it proved at least that he finally understood. My mother, Linda, the one who once advised me to be gentle and let the men decide, now often stopped by my office with her familiar apple pie. She didn't say much, only smiled. "I brought you something, remember to eat when you work late." For the first time I saw pride in her eyes. As for William and Margaret, they begrudgingly attended meetings but no longer dared dismiss me. Under the new voting system tied to capital contribution, their influence nearly vanished. Their resentment was clear, but they had no choice. Over the past year, I built not only capital but a team. I hired young talents overlooked by big firms for being inexperienced. I saw myself in them, undervalued yet brimming with potential. Their creativity and loyalty helped Morgan Capital Strategies become the fastest-growing branch in the family's history. One memory stayed with me, the 1-year anniversary celebration. I stood on stage looking out at the audience, my father, my mother, even Jake among them. Thunderous applause filled the hall as I shared our results. For the first time, my father stepped forward in public, embraced me, and declared, "My daughter has proven that respect is not given, it must be claimed." The room fell quiet for a heartbeat, then erupted in applause. I stood there, my heart both warm and strong. For years I had longed for recognition. But now I understood. Recognition was never a gift. It was the outcome of standing tall and defending my worth. After the party, Jake quietly approached me. For the first time he spoke honestly, "You're really good, Sarah. I thought you were just book smart." I was wrong. I only smiled. No more words were needed. A year ago I was a shadow in the boardroom, cut off and ignored. Now I led a thriving branch that forced the Morgans to restructure just to keep me. The path had been painful, filled with betrayal. But in the end I had proven one simple truth. Respect is never handed down. It only comes when you are strong enough to claim it yourself. Sarah's story doesn't end with the Morgan family. It mirrors real life. Many of us have been underestimated even while we were the ones keeping everything running. Sarah proved that value doesn't come from others' approval, but from the courage to rise and defend your own work. In life, sometimes we must step out of the role of the silent endurer to claim our place. The lesson here: respect isn't given, it's something we fight for and win ourselves. What do you think about Sarah's journey and the shift within the Morgan family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more moving stories and powerful lessons about family life.